back, YouTube, to another Fat Guy Builds episode. We're back with the 2017 Mustang, and I don't know if you know, but the 2015 to the 2017 Mustang intake manifold blows compared to pretty much every other one. So I went and bought the 2018 and newer GT manifold, which VMP on YouTube, if you are curious, they have a shootout. This makes the same power as a GT350 manifold, so we're good. So I'm going to run this. Got the plug-and-play harness to keep my butterflies. And there's been no dyno data that says they're a restriction. They actually help you in the mid-range and low. So don't get rid of them. Just buy these. It's simple. VMP has them on their website. So I'm going to go through this step by step, and let's get started. Pull up on this engine cover, pull up in the front, pull up in the back, and then slide it out the front. Take a 15mm socket, a deep socket, and remove these two. On the passenger side, this wiring harness that goes to the battery has this on the stud. You just wiggle it and it'll come off. And then use the same 15mm, remove these two. Now you can remove the strut brace. If you have the strut bar, you're going to have to unbolt the factory positive in order to get the strut bar off, because the height between here and here, look, you just can't lift the strut bar high enough to get it off. So come in here, you spin this till there's a gap, then you wiggle the clip out, and then just go like this, and you're going to have to get under here, and then there's a 10mm right where my finger is. You undo that 10mm and that cable will come right off. We need to remove the fuel pump fuse, which is going to be this one here. I'm going to zoom in for you. So this 30 amp fuse, grab a pair of pliers, pull that one out. Once the fuse is out, you can try to start it to get the fuel pressure out. Do that twice. Now we're going to start unclipping hoses. So first one I'm going to do is this one, which is the PCV. I have mine going to a catch can, but if you don't, this will just wrap around to here. So you're going to pull up on these little green teeth and then push towards the other side, and then you're going to wiggle it off. Behind the throttle body, there's this sensor. Unplug it like so. Unplug the MAF sensor. Remove the driver's side PCV hose from the intake. Loosen the clamp for the intake to the throttle body. Now that you have it twisted, just out of the way, we can disconnect this line and this line that goes into the intake tube. To disconnect it, you push down this button and then you pull them apart. Remove the four 10mm nuts, two on each side, there and there. Take an 8mm socket and remove the sensor right behind the throttle body. The sensor also has this hose connected to it, so pop out this backside, which locks it, and then you're going to push this button and then pull it off like so. Now we can get that sensor out. Since you have the two nuts off on each side, You lift this line, move this line out of the way. First you'll pull this plastic piece off, then you'll pull this rubber piece off. Do that on both sides. Instead of removing the line from the brake booster itself, I'm going to remove the line, the vacuum line, from here, because that clamp's a lot easier to get to. And I'm probably going to replace that little clamp with just a standard clamp as well, just because that's this is one of those weaker ones. This is a normal, like, decent quality clamp. That one's totally different though. Once you get the hose off, I just bent it over to over here so it's out of the way. To disconnect the throttle body, you're going to pull this red clip out. That allows you to push down on this black button and then unplug the throttle body from the wiring harness. Disconnect this vacuum line here so that we can remove this entire piece. Disconnect the coolant reservoir hose, this one, and I suggest grabbing it back here with a pair of vice grips and clamping on it very softly, but enough to block it so you don't leak too much coolant on the floor. You don't want to be leaking out of that hose at all. To disconnect the fuel line from the rail, you're going to push the two little blue tabs here on the bottom, and then it will pop up like that. Once it's popped up like that, you can just pull it off. Go around the engine, unplug all the injectors from this harness. You just push this little tab and then pull up, and it'll come right off. Now that the injectors are disconnected, the fuel rail can come out. In order to get the fuel rail out, there are 10mm bolts all the way around, right there. That's connected to the silver rail. 4 of them, 2 on each side again. Take those out. The fuel rail is held in by these 4 long bolts. Now your fuel rail's unbolted with those 4 long bolts. You're just going to sort of slide this radiator heater hose out of the way. You give it a nice little wiggle until it pops out. Come on the other side. Do the same thing. Give it a little wiggle. Pop it out. And then you should just be able to pull it out. Remove the throttle body. These ones are 8mm. Clean the throttle body inside and out so that, you know, it's just less dirty when you put it back together with something brand new. Hand start the 4 bolts on the new intake manifold, and then start tightening it in a cross pattern. So here, there, here, here, like this. You do a couple turns all the way around. That way you smush this gasket evenly and you won't have any vacuum leaks. Go all the way around the intake. You're going to unbolt it now. It's an 8mm, and you're just going to go all the way around. So this line is connected to this wiring harness with this plastic clip. So undo that, because otherwise when you pull the intake you're going to break that. Alright, so you're going to have to do this one side at a time because these guys are assholes. So there's a plug, the bottom of here, bottom of this thing here, there's a plug pointed straight down. What makes things worse is that they peg the wiring harness into the back of the intake manifold. So you're going to have to use a panel popper to disconnect it from the corner back in there. So I only have this side done, so now I need to tip this thing the other way and do the other side. these top two plugs, those are the easy ones to get to. These bottom two, you have to tilt it 45 degrees either way to get to them. These ones, I guess because they're vertical, they have a little pull latch, so you have to pull the little tab down first and then push the button and then pull it off. On top of that, the wiring harness that connects all this together is pegged here and pegged here. So you need to use a flathead screwdriver or something, unpeg the wiring harness that goes like this, unpeg it off. This is the lever. You need to pull it down, so you're going to push it down in order to push on this button to unlock it. Well, I got everything out, so now I can take it, pull it all the way out. So you're going to need to unpeg that wiring harness before you pull it off, because it's also connected to these two knock sensors down here, and you don't want to damage those by just yanking on it. Now, take a clean rag, clean the mating surface, and do that all the way around before we put the new manifold in. The kit comes with these 4 studs, and what you're going to do is get them started by hand, and then there is a like reverse Torx bit here. We're going to use a socket to tighten them down. You're going to use a 4mm. It works good enough. And you're just going to go down till it bottoms out. Do not torque this crazy. You will rip the plastic threads out. So when you buy the plug and play harness, the blue one goes here, and then the 2 black ones plug in here and here. They're identical. I haven't seen any difference between these. These 2 are going to plug in the blue connectors. They only have 2 pins. These 2 are they're color matched then. These plug into the white ones. That was the vertical ones on the 2015 to 17, the ones that were up and down. They're going to plug into these 2. We're going to slide in the new manifold. Slide it in like so. Now we're going to plug everything together. So, the blue ones are going to plug into here. And then, click, click. Then the white ones, I'm just going to do left and right. So they sort of matched what they were. So the left one goes to the left one. Click. Remember, there's a safety clicker, so it doesn't unlock. When you plug these together now, don't forget, relock it. Just sort of get this in, nice and smooth. Now you're going to take an 8mm and an extension and slowly hand start all of the intake manifold bolts. So the way you're going to want to tighten this down is in almost like a cross head gasket style head bolt ritual. So I'm going to go middle to where it's semi-tight, middle on this side, so it's semi-tight, across here, across over here, across over here, and then finally this corner, and then redo it again. So middle, middle, out. Just make sure you crisscross all the time. Do this by hand, do little by little, so it tightens down flush. Clean off your fuel injectors. Just make sure there's not a bunch of dirt on them. You're going to slowly go down. You're going to get all of them lined up on their holes. This one, you're going to have to pull this hose so it's not restricting that line. And once you have both sides lined up, you're just going to give it a little wiggle, the same way you pulled it off. You just give it a little bit of pressure and wiggle it, and it'll slowly just click in. I'll take these long bolts, slide them back in. You're going to start them with the socket and an extension by hand. You don't want to cross thread any of this stuff. And then just torque them down. Next thing we're going to do, now that this is all tight, plug in all the injectors. To get these heat shields back on, these runners are bigger, so you just sort of have to massage it. Just start with the back of it, flush with the back of the fuel rail, and then finger massage it in between the gap between the fuel rail and the manifold. Alright, you're going to notice a gap now here. That's alright. But you're going to reinstall this vacuum brake booster assembly deal. Take the black nuts with the black washers built on and screw those back on. Use a 10mm to retighten both of them on this side and on this side. I suggest if you did what I did and you removed it here, replace that clamp. Now it's time to reconnect the fuel line. So you push it all the way, and then you're going to push down on that blue clip till it locks here. Alright, now we're going to feed the coolant hose back. Obviously don't forget to put the hose clamp back on, because you'll be kicking yourself in the ass. Put that back on and tighten it down. Reach down here, plug back in your throttle body. It'll snap, and then push in that red piece to lock it. We have to tear apart this hose that goes to the back. So I already cut the front off. Then I cut off this hard plastic shrink tube shit. Put on some hose here. This is... what size is this? I don't know. I'm sorry. It's not on the label. So, we have that piece. Good. Now, we need to pay attention. Black front, green to the back. So I already cut it again. So green to the back. We're going to cut off this heat shrink tubing, and we're going to install it into here, like so. And then we're going to cut it to the proper length, so that this one plugs in here, and then this goes here, and then this one, the other side of this, will go to here. So you're going to need to squeeze both of these clamps, remove this pile of garbage off of this. We're going to throw this in the trash. And then this one goes onto the center one. So there's 1, 2, 3. This one will go on the center one. The crankcase line from this valve cover will go around, clip into this one here that is on sort of a 45-degree angle. And that's all there is to it. If you have a catch can, then it'll go out and come back, and that'll clip into that one. So here is, from this 90-degree bend, the factory fitting here, hose, that check valve, black to the front, green to the back, and then the hose to the intake. Now we have 3 of the 4. Well, with the hose I have, this was not fun, but I got a hose and a clamp on the bottom. It's a long piece, so I'm going to cut it to fit in a minute. So this connector needs to go here. Clip that on. Don't forget to put the locking mechanism on the opposite side. Now we're going to plug in the wiring harness to the solenoid. So I got that clamp tight now. It loops around like that, goes down. Then I use some zip ties to zip it to the fuel rail to make it cleaner looking. we're more or less ready to put the air intake tube back on. Connect this one back, connect that one back to the intake tube. Make sure when you put the intake tube back on that it's flush with the throttle body before you tighten it. And the fitment is different because the angle of the throttle body is different. But you just have to sort of rotate it, make it fit. So mine, I had to spin it down, which is making this a little bit awkward, but in the big picture, it looks good. Put the fuse back in for the fuel pump, and close the fuse box. Set in the strut bar brace, and the car should turn on now. So before I button up everything, I just set that on, so if the car does start, I can tighten down. I don't have to remove the battery again to get the strut tower brace put in. So I put the strut tower brace loose with no bolts. I'm going to put the power cable on, and we're going to try to start this. There we go. I had a little weird issue with my radio once I started it, where pretty much barely any of the buttons worked. So I retuned it, and that also did a master reset on the radio. But everything works now. So I'm going to tighten down the 4 bolts for the strut brace, and I'm going to put the battery tray cover back in. I am now at the dyno shop. We're going to get a custom tune for this intake. You know, I could have just got the one from VMP, but considering these guys are local, they do all kinds of good work. I'd rather have a place I can touch up, and this is the guy that's going to do the tune when I get the turbos too. So this way my life is easier. But if you're going to order this intake, then just order the tune from VMP and you're all good. Alright, here's the final pull. We'll see what it makes. Now take a look at this dyno graph. We got just more power everywhere from stock. Way up top, it's a massive difference from 348 to 416. It's crazy. From 269 to 322, it's crazy. So for the money, this intake plus the dyno tune, best thing you can do for your car, $1 per horsepower type of thing. Yeah, can't complain. Install, anyone could do this.
Obviously you need a tuner, but in the big picture, simple, right? So I highly suggest this. Go ahead and do it. Let's get this done on everybody's car that's 17 and older, especially the Gen 1. I'm sure that on the Gen 1 it makes a pretty big difference. So post your numbers below or links to your dyno sheets or whatever, and let's take a look at everybody else's stuff. Just try to make sure your dyno sheet's in smoothing 5 and SAE, because if not, then they're sort of fake numbers. Smoothing 0 is all fake number crap.
I'd like to thank everybody for checking out my video. We're all buttoned up. It's midnight. I gotta wake up in the morning to do some radiator hose stuff, colder thermostat. Man, I got a Barton shifter. Anyways, keep going on my channel. Subscribe, like, all that stuff. Till next time, wrench on.